range. It's like it goes from like subtle to like extreme. It's like it's either like in the language, it's either in like an interaction, it's in the feel. You can just feel, you're white, I'm black, or it's like a very outward thing.
Racism in South Africa. It exists, and thus means racism inevitably becomes, by definition, something that can only be enacted from a place of authority. The tricky part is what happens when black people are also guilty of racially discriminating someone. Would that then now fall into a realm of racism? And in a country like ours, where black people do hold power, the way we look at power may be very narrow. We may look at power as something economic and very authoritative, and it does need dissecting and understanding that we are also open to the idea that blackness can actually fit that description given certain conditions, and by virtue of that, blackness can be itself also an agent of racism.
But as I stayed in South Africa more and more and more, I was gradually getting disenchanted with the whole thing, but race things. And I think for me, the moment everything was unveiled was during the Rhodes Must Fall movement. I don't know if you're part of it, but there was a movement, hashtag Rhodes Must Fall, Fees Must Fall. Basically, they were protesting that the statue of Cecil John Rhodes, who basically colonized the whole of the whole of Southern Africa, and had a country named after him, Rhodesia. Rhodesia is like part of Zimbabwe. His statue was erected right at the center of the University of Cape Town, basically at a very strategic, position, overlooking the whole of the city. Because obviously, the university, if you check it out, it's kind of, goes from because obviously Cape Town is not like, this flat place, it's very mountainous. So the university has a lower campus, a middle campus, and a upper campus, and the upper campus sits just on the foot of the tip of the mountain, basically, on one of the mountains. I think it's Devil's Peak. So from that point, you can see basically the city, and that's where his statue was erected. The students, protested. In fact, one of the students, there was already the controversy, and then one student just went, which I know very well is my friend. He threw poop on the statue, and that made news everywhere. So that whole hashtag thing, when eventually that statue was removed, I also participated in the protest just a little bit, let's say 0.5%, yes, or 1%. I was a Nigerian. The way we're brought up in Nigeria is be a good boy, don't protest, don't do all of those things, just be a nice, good, responsible man. So obviously for me, I was conflicted, but obviously I eventually understood what was going on. So for me, I was like, for me, it was like an eye opener, because
South Africans are very welcoming of foreigners. I'm welcoming of foreigners. This question definitely made me think about xenophobia, but I think that it wouldn't be the same conversation, because in our country, xenophobia stems from like a hatred or prejudice or some sort of discrimination against other Africans. And I think that it's not the same conversation to put it under the same banner as foreigners, because these aren't foreigners. These are our brothers and sisters, quite literally, in terms of bloodline. And so, yeah, we're welcoming of foreigners, I would say. Like, South African people are very warm, very kind. Yeah.
I think South Africans of a certain class don't really mind. And when I say of a certain class, it's really above the poverty line, like above poverty. It's not necessarily that strained, the relationship with foreign nationals. And I think it's because that sense of security, they people who live above, I guess, the poverty line don't feel insecure at the idea of someone else coming in and taking their opportunity to change their life or to maybe upgrade or maybe access to better education or to jobs or anything like that. So that sense of insecurity in a much deeper layered way, we have a very like strained, I would say, relation with certain types of immigration and migration and immigration. We've got our own brain drain happening, where people study in the country, possibly, you know, get qualified, and then like they leave for, we'll call them quote unquote greener pastures. It's not necessarily an intentional xenophobia from the core. It's really more of like a class struggle. And then because people are within the same class, like if someone's a refugee from, let's say, Congo, and then they're here, they actually gonna find themselves within the same like social circles and same like life paths almost as a South African who also like has had trouble moving up the class ladder or the education ladder. So what you end up with is poorer South Africans engaging with like poorer African nationals, foreign nationals. So what you end up with is more of a class struggle, because then, if you're like a poor South African, you're looking at the landscape and you're like, man, I'm broke, and there's still more of the pie that has to be shared with people whom you can easily say aren't South Africans. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, everyone's African, but it becomes so much harder to be accepting when the question is between your next meal and shelter, and you not having that, because there is obviously this whole dynamic of refugee communities. And, obviously, refugee communities also have to hold each other together and also have to keep each other strong and also have to create a sense of security within their own community. So, yes, they will maybe take over a certain part of the city, and that space becomes really a refugee space, or like a foreign national space, or like just a foreign international kind of energy and community. And I guess a lot of poor South Africans end up feeling displaced by that, because what ends up happening is these communities are usually near economic hubs. So you'll find that foreign African nationals are living in like the central business district, while poor South Africans are like relocated to like Soweto and the outskirts of business centers. So even having access to the business center, it seems like, when someone comes in from abroad, from like a different country in Africa, they go straight to a community that's close to the business district, thus increasing their likelihood of being near the jobs, being closer to all of that, not needing to deal so much with the transport, being able to walk to the businesses, whilst a poor South African will find themselves in Soweto and still has to deal with that hurdle of transport and access. So it becomes very easy to see it as, oh man, that community where you are close to the business headquarters is where I was supposed to be, where I'm meant to be. You are technically displacing me economically because you have access to business, uh, to business operations, to businesses, to even business people, just while South Africans who are pushed to the outskirts, who are pushed to townships, pushed to squatter camps, who are poor, are so far from those opportunities that it's really unrealistic for them to even believe that they can seize those opportunities when they come up. So it just creates that weird tension where poor South Africans feel like suddenly someone else just skipped over them in the line towards a better life. And this person wasn't even born in South Africa and all of that. So it creates that conflict. And that's kind of the clashes that people are seeing and labeling as xenophobia, because they're not really being unearthed and they're not really being investigated underneath.
I think South Africa is a very beautiful country, naturally. I have to stress that. I've been to places, I've been to, Paris, I've been to like places in Europe, in Asia, and all of those places. I find South Africa to be uniquely beautiful. You're very, very, very unique. And I mean in a very natural way. The landscape is beautiful. So South Africa is blessed. And then when it comes to nature and all of those, and when you talk about the mountain, the ocean, I mean, few places will give you that mountain and sea or vibe together. And of course, that South Africa is perhaps the only place, okay, not the only place, but maybe where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean meets. So obviously that's something nice to see. But also South Africa has a lot of things like the Table Mountain, like a lot of tourist places, tourist, destinations, to go to. It has a lot. Like even me, I've not exhausted everything, and I've been here and I would never exhaust everything. But I've been to a lot of places, and it's beautiful. It's nice. It's mostly safe. The quality is good. South Africa has a lot of things. I think one of the beautiful strategic things about South Africa is that it has best of both worlds. It has first world and it has third world in the same country. You would never, you can't find. I don't know if there's anywhere you can find that. The food is good. Food is good. The food is good. I mean, I've been around. The food is good. Like restaurant food is good and it's cheap. Living in South Africa is relatively cheaper than if you can get what you'd get in the West if you want, but it will be cheaper compared to in terms of outing restaurant. So you can basically eat out and you won't really feel it because it's relatively cheap. But you know where that cheapness comes from. It comes from cheap black labor. So I'm sure that's why. I know a lot of people in the US don't know, but if you check some of the world rankings of universities, South Africa has some of the best universities in the world. Most of South African universities are highly ranked. They are world standard. And we do have obviously a lot of, like the university I attend, it's a diverse. In fact, it's ranked, I think, the 10th or in the top 10 most diverse university in terms of their people from everywhere in the world. And obviously